Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we're back.
Yes, we are back.
Time flies when you're having fun, especially during the break.
I think we ought to start recording the intermission.
That is
we
true.
Have some really lively conversations.
We've always talked about doing between the breaks.
Between the breaks. That
between
could be a whole
the breaks.
show.
It could be a whole new one right there.
So,
but let me tell you, we have another great guest in studio right now. You know, one of the things I got to tell you about this guest is we have a golf tournament coming up at the end of the year. The Real Estate Rat Pack is involved with it. Absolutely. And one of the first individuals who called me up and said, I want to get involved, and more importantly, I want to sponsor a hole-in-one contest was Tim. How you doing there, Tim O'Neill?
Fine. Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
Thanks for that, and thanks for that, too. Tim, let us know a little bit about you. I mean, what do you do? How'd you get involved? Let us know everything about you.
I'm a State Farm agent. I've got over 20 years in the business, and I started out in claims, dragging a tape measure through hot Texas attics and cold northern basements, chasing storms, hail, tornadoes, all of it. And then when we had 2 children, my income was keeping up, but then I couldn't keep my wife off of me. And, and we had 3. I'm falling further behind. 4 children. So I needed to make more money. And so I decided to explore the agency opportunity, and things worked out. And so I transitioned from claims adjuster to agent, and along the way became a property and casualty underwriter. And so here I am today. I'm an agent underwriter. And
how long ago was that you made that choice?
2000. That was
2000.
2000.
My youngest was born in 2000, and that was it. I was working 3 nights a week waiting tables to try and keep up.
So let me just let all listeners know this. So if you can't keep your wife off of you, become an insurance agent. Is that correct?
That's it.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I heard that
when you come home and talk about actuary tables, that is like a cold shower. Just saying.
Wow, what a turn this show has taken.
Hey, I am only going with the flow.
That's right. So we oftentimes, especially insurance, when I talk about insurance, my eyes literally glaze over. It's, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. And so there's a lot of things that people don't know when they're looking at policies, because they go get the cheapest thing they can get. What is it they should be looking to find in those policies?
You can't find it. I have attorneys.
That's why they put it in small print.
And that was this week's show. We'll be back next week.
Because really, no offense to the profession, but we have attorneys who aren't necessarily insurance specialist attorneys call, and as I've just read this contract, and then they'll say something that's completely wrong. So you really can't necessarily pick it up, read it, and understand the context. And so that's why having an agent is not a bad idea.
Always hire a professional, because they can interpret the
sure.
Whatever hieroglyphics that you're reading.
Any bureaucracy you're going to have to deal with, you want to have somebody running point, whether it's a medical bureaucracy or legal, or any insurance company. It's just a gigantic bureaucracy, so you got to have somebody to help you.
Someone comes to me and they say, I've got XYZ insurance company, and they're about 25% less than you, and you look at their policies, and so what do you typically find?
Then that's when we try and pivot to life insurance. And
See what else? Let's go ahead and think about your life insurance policy. How you doing today?
Yeah. Tim definitely sponsored the right show.
He absolutely did.
Okay, so
sometimes
I think the Astros are going to do this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I got my seats.
But I know there's a difference in the policies, and that's why I guess when I'm driving home, there's different ratings at the companies and things like that, and there's certain criteria that are met in some policies that are not met in others, and there's a minimum.
But that's today. But I'll say, interestingly, and you can be the judge, it's not that long ago in Texas that there was just one policy. There was the Texas HOB. It was promulgated by the State Department of Insurance, and that was basically the only policy that any insurance company could sell. You could stamp your logo on it, and you go sell it. But there was no competition with regard to coverage or that. And then 5, 6, 7 years ago was when Texas market opened up, and now our policy is different from the other guy's policy, and there are 6 or 8 or 10 different policies. So now you really do get to compare coverage and compare what type of policy it is. And sometimes you'll find that a less than policy is 25% less costly than an all-encompassing policy. And so there are definitely some points of comparison that are fair.
What's the biggest mistake you see people make when buying coverage?
Probably underinsuring. It gets into very complex questions of, okay, people say, what's this house worth? And, well, how much you just paid for it is a good indication of the market value. And then what's it's being assessed for on taxation is another value. And then, comps in the neighborhood and all this other. But when it burns down, none of those values matter, because what people look at us for is enough money to put it back like it was. And that's labor, materials, supervision, design. People don't generally have their blueprints laying around when they need to go and build their house back. And so sometimes we'll find, my sister, for example, lives in Westview on Community Drive in one of the older houses built in the 20s or 30s. And it's, 1,200 square feet, 1,300 square feet.
Do you want to sell it?
She wouldn't take less than, she would take hundreds of thousands of dollars is the market cost of that house. But it could be rebuilt for, a quarter of what it would sell for. And so you have that disconnect between replacement cost and market value. And sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes we'll get someone who got a really great distressed sale deal, and they got a 4,000 square foot house for $180,000. And then we had to tell them the replacement cost on that is $400,000 or more, based on the square footage. And so we get all this kind of disconnect. And it's, it does come down to price. And sometimes, you have to tell people how it's going to be.
And that's important, I'll tell you, because, a lot of times what we see on the mortgage side of things is, you're absolutely right, Tim. We go out there, individuals buying a home, they're buying a home for, let's say, $500,000, using that as an example. Insurance come back, and the binder comes back for $200,000. So the underwriter goes, whoa, this is underinsured, for an average individual who might be financing $400,000. So then you have to go back through and explain that, and then you have to subtract out land, obviously, because land doesn't have, land burns down, land's still valued the same right there. But it is one of those things that can be confusing for a lot of individuals who don't understand how that works.
It is, and sometimes people can be done a disservice. We won't get too technical now, but there are penalties involved in most policies if you're not insured to at least 80% of replacement cost. And,
really?
And bad things happen. And sometimes when, people are on a race to the bottom, because sometimes people are very, it's difficult. They're like, Chris, they're touch and go whether they can qualify.
Right.
And everything has to be just right. And one of the corners that somebody can cut can be on either reducing the coverage on an insurance policy or going with, a new player who gets it cheaper. And sometimes that's what you have to do to close the deal. And then, what we do is we send the mortgage company what they want to see, and then, to close, and then the customer has to come back and say, well, what do we really want to do? And, it's
right.
difficult. You really want to do the right thing for everybody.
Let me ask you this, because this I think is I know the answer to this question because we have the guys sitting here with us.
Why are you asking it?
But for the listener, all five of them, it's an important question. With something as technically complicated as insurance can be, right? How does someone go about choosing an agent? Is there any from the consumer side saying, well, he has an interest in selling me the product, so how do I know that I've got the right guy to also simultaneously tell me that what he's selling me is the best thing? Is there some things that they can look for that would keep them from hurting themselves in that process?
I think it's the relation. Picture this. Picture a man or woman out walking a dog. The agent is the dog. The underwriter is the guy or lady holding the leash, because the agents are out there trying to sell, and they're trying to sniff up the next sale and sell the policy.
I'm getting these images of
yeah. And then there's the underwriter in the back office saying, did you ask this? Did you ask that? Do they have this going on? And, some agents are, like in our case, it's all the same company. My underwriter emails me and says, hey, did you know about this? But there's not a disconnect where I don't deal with several companies and have several different underwriters to answer to, and we have one set of rules, and it's going to be the same thing 5 or 10 years from now. So to your point, what do I want to do to close this policy and get this done today is one thing, but then the question is, well, what are they going? Do I have to call 1-800 who are you again when I need service, or is it going to be the same person who calls and we know who you are? Because I sign a lot of my deals at people's kitchen tables, so I've been to their homes, I know who they are, and when they call, you don't tell your number when you call my office. We know who you are, So there's that taking a longer term perspective on this, particularly in the mortgage and people involved in that thing is. when you're going to make a referral, who's going to be taking care of these people for the next 10 or 20 years?
And, and I want to clarify one thing. Number one is, for all those people who have heard that insurance agent is a dog, it's now been clarified, by the way. But more importantly, more importantly, what Tim said, though, is it comes down to exactly what he said. Referring out to an individual who's going to be there, who you're not a number, you're a name, you're a relationship. That means a lot. I mean, across the board, we talk about what you don't know can hurt you. We also talk about dealing with professionals. Professionals are individuals that know who you are, that know part of your life, that know your changes, births, umbrella policies required when you put in a new pool. I'm using those other examples, and those are things that Tim is very, very good at.
And we talk about an umbrella policy a lot, and I think a lot of people have gone and gotten them where they have like $1 million umbrella. It's fairly inexpensive and can do some protections. Somebody slips and falls somewhere that your property was the cause of it and things like that. So do you recommend people buy that kind of product?
Sure. It's designed to protect your net worth. And if you're driving along and a terrible thing happens and you hit a kid on a bike, then you're going to, if you have stocks and bonds and think for things that are, on the line, then, you need to have enough liability insurance to cover your net worth in the event something like that happens. So it's definitely worth it.
I had a deal several years back, and I was representing a buyer, and the home had a little leak above the header in the garage, and but there was never a claim made, but it was still reported on the Clue report, and it ended up costing my buyer about $1,000 extra. I mean, I don't know if we got enough time. We're coming up against a break, but how do you address stuff? Why are they penalizing somebody when a claim wasn't made?
They may have called and asked if it was covered, and if you have your agent who knows to look in the policy and tell you whether or not it's covered, that's one thing. But if they have to turn it into the claims department to find out if it's covered.
Yeah, it's just an inquiry. That's all it was.
But so those type of things can, if you turn it in and technically if a claim adjuster picks it up and looks at it, or if reserves are opened on that loss, then it's a claim, even if it winds up being not covered. So.
Well, time flies when you're having fun. Tim, how can we get a hold of you if you don't mind?
Phone number and website are the same. Hey, like this, 281-358-4444, and just .com for the email.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Clever.
That is awesome. Well, time flies when you're having fun. We have one more open mic segment. We're going to be sharing mics, getting close together, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.